So I'm going to play two versions of an extract from a piece of music. It's only short. I would just like you to listen to them and decide which one you prefer. Now, it's not a trick question. There is no right or wrong answer. So have a listen and just decide which one you like the best. Now you can probably tell there is quite a difference between the two recordings. They are from a piece of music I wrote for the flute called Evelyn's Theme. If you want to hear the whole tune, a card should pop up here and there will be a link in the description. You will almost certainly be able to tell the difference. The first extract is from my original recording, which was done on the Yamaha SY77, and the lead line, the flute, was a flute sound created by the Yamaha SY77. The second extract, as I'm sure you could tell, was a recording of a real live flute, which was instead played by a real live Evelyn. Now, as I said, there's no right or wrong answer. If you prefer the synthy version, that's absolutely fine. But personally, I think the acoustic recording of the flute adds another level to the music. So in this video, I simply want to suggest that even if you are a die-hard electronic music producer who only uses synthesizers, you might want to at least consider using an acoustic instrument in your music. And the reason is simply to add a greater level of interest and tonal variation to your music. Now, if you are a keyboard player, as I am, the tonal variations you produce when creating synthesized music probably ranges from playing softly to loudly, and also playing, shall we say, staccato or legato, and anything in between, of course. So you have these two levels of dynamics and articulation, and these will feed into the synthesizer and determine the output. However, acoustic instruments have a greater range of articulations and dynamics than we are probably used to trying to express simply on a keyboard. Now, I'm not suggesting that you write trumpet or flute sonatas, but there are probably sounds in your compositions which sound vaguely like acoustic instruments. Perhaps a pad might have a string quality to it. Perhaps a bass line, rather than being a synthy bass, might have an acoustic bass feel to it. So there might just be sections in your composition which could be well played on an acoustic instrument, and that would make it stand out from the normal run of synthesizer and electronic based compositions. Now, if you are a die-hard electronic music producer, well, you've probably switched off a while back, but the intention is not for this to take over your music. It is just an addition to make it more dynamic and interesting and human, perhaps, if that's what you want. So back in 1991, when I wrote and recorded Evelyn's Theme, the only way to record an acoustic instrument was to actually get the instrument in the same room and physically record it. Now, however, with the advent of digital music technology, that is no longer necessary. There are now two ways we can add acoustic instruments to our music. The first, obviously, is by recording a real instrument, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a second, but the second way is through the use of sample libraries. So in case you are primarily an electronic music and synthesizer producer and unfamiliar with sample libraries, they are essentially recordings of real live acoustic instruments. Now, the reason why sample libraries can produce such an accurate representation of acoustic instruments is because the producers have sampled every note at different dynamic levels and different articulations. So the tonal variety and range that you can get from a good sample library is almost as good as a real acoustic instrument. However, to get the best out of it, you do need to use the articulations and use dynamics. So this is just to give you an example of the sort of articulations you might find in a sample library. This is Spitfire Audio's chamber strings, and the articulations are listed along the bottom for this particular instrument, which is cello. There is legato, of course. This particular instrument looks at the way you are playing the note and produces a legato effect according to the way that you are playing. Other articulations along the bottom, I can't remember what all these specific articulations are, but typically in a string section, for example, you will find staccato, spiccato, marcato, sforzando, pizzicato. And at the end of the line here of articulations, this particular instrument has tremolo, and there are a couple of trills. Now these are the sort of sounds and effects which you really cannot synthesize. To get an authentic effect which contains the notes and the articulations and the tones of these particular types of effect, you really need to have a real instrument play them, and that is what these do. Now here is a list of the articulations which Spitfire Audio's chamber strings has and supports, and you can see it is quite a long list, and as I said before, this is by no means exhaustive. The point is, an instrumentalist might use several of these techniques when playing even a 4 or an 8 bar phrase, so the chances of reproducing this sort of effect with any degree of accuracy using just a synthesizer is fairly remote. Now at this point I would like to bring on a heavy hitter, one of my favourite YouTubers, Guy Mitchellmore. Now Guy is an award-winning film and media composer. Yes, he writes music for the movies, and his channel is concerned with all aspects of that. He has a lot of material about composition and about using sample libraries. He is a master of sample library production. For many of his movies, the aim is to produce as real and convincing a reproduction of an orchestra as possible. If the budget allows, he will actually conduct a real live orchestra. But in most cases, because of budget restrictions, he uses sample libraries. So if you want to know how to get the best out of a sample library, I can do no better than to point you to his channel. Now, if you think sample libraries are expensive, yes, they can be, but there are also some absolutely wonderful free ones, which I'll get to in a second. Now, in some of Guy's videos, he makes a very interesting point. He adds a real acoustic instrument to his composition. This might be a tin whistle, it might be a guitar, it might be an ethnic percussion instrument. And one of the really interesting things he says is that adding a real live acoustic instrument to his composition makes it stand out from other compositions which simply use sample libraries. Now, I thought that was a very interesting thing to say, coming from someone who makes a living using sample libraries. Also, in some other videos, he has said that the sound of a real live orchestra performance is head and shoulders above even the best sampled orchestral library. But don't let that stop you using sample libraries, even if you don't have an orchestra in your back garden. So let's look at the two options we have for getting an acoustic instrument into your music. The first obviously is with sample libraries, and you can really only do this from within the DAW. Some companies produce their own VST plugins of their sample libraries, but the majority of sample libraries run in a sample player. The most popular is probably Native Instruments Kontakt, but there are others. Now there's a free version of Kontakt, although because it's free, not all sample libraries will play on it. Some need the full version. Now, just as an aside, if this idea appeals to you and you are thinking of getting the full version of Kontakt, Native Instruments produce a package called Complete Control. And if you compare the price of the Kontakt sample player with the price of the complete control package, which obviously is more expensive, you get a massive amount of sounds and instruments and presets in the complete control package. So I think it's a far better value proposition, even though it does cost more. So having said all that, if you want to experiment with sample libraries, if you go to Google and type in free sample libraries, you will get hundreds and hundreds of One of the best free sample libraries which I can recommend come from Spitfire Audio, and they have a series called Spitfire Labs, which are essentially cut down versions of some of their bigger products. But these are totally free and they sound absolutely fantastic. The other option, of course, is to record a real live acoustic instrument. Now, I think that one of the things that prevented me from doing this in the past is that I didn't actually know anyone who played an acoustic instrument. But I think here social media can be your friend, and if you put out the word that you're looking for a cellist or a trumpeter, for example, one of your friends or a friend of a friend may know someone who plays an instrument. And if that fails, there will be music forums where instrumentalists hang out, so you may be able to make a contact with someone there. And if that fails, there is always Fiverr. Now, I haven't researched this at all. I do know there are vocalists on Fiverr who will sing your song for a nominal fee, and I would assume there are instrumentalists there too. Now, one of the really great things about modern music technology is that they don't have to come along to your studio. They can make the recording in their own environment, send it to you, and you can drop it into your DAW, into your own composition. So that's essentially it for this video. It's simply a suggestion, something you might like to consider to add to your existing repertoire of sounds, and consider whether an acoustic instrument could benefit your composition. Maybe it can. So if you have any questions about anything in this video, or in fact if you have tried to combine acoustic instruments with electronic recordings, then please let me know, leave a comment, and I will reply to you as soon as I possibly can. If you've enjoyed this video, if you found it useful or helpful or inspiring, preferably all three, but I'll settle for any one, perhaps you would like to consider subscribing to the channel, ringing the bell, and clicking the big thumb. And as always, I really do appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. So thank you for that very much indeed. I will see you in the next video very soon.